Hello and welcome to another segment of YourTown television program. My name is King Grossman. I host Artivism, which is a monthly segment where we look at the cross-section between creativity in the arts and how it affects our community and how it informs our walk as citizens and just the joy of creativity as well, which is not a just, it's plenty. And today I'm very excited to have a friend of mine that we met actually because John Van Hise IV, who wrote this magnificent book, Tales from Forest's Edge. Well, John works at Pacific Grove Golf Course. He also works at Monterey Pines. And I'm a writer and golfer, so we made fast friends. So I want to welcome John to the program, and thank you for being here, John.
Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you, John gave me a copy of his book to read, and I started reading it. I had not really read that much in the way of fables and fairy tales. You know, the Little Prince and some others I've read, but really I started reading your book, and it was just so refreshing to read this style for me. And it's kind of hopeful in that regard because the fantasy aspect of it, I think, lends to that. But I want to ask you, what drew you to write such, you know, poignant and all the same lyrical fables as fairy tales? What made it important to you to do that?
Mostly from my imagination. My mind has always been coming up with stories. When I was in high school, I finally hit upon writing as just an outlet for that. And really been doing that ever since. Only recently have I actually been able to get things more complete and into a more polished form. So it's just something I just like doing.
Was there a particular fairy tale or fable that kind of drew you to this form versus poetry or other forms of short prose that are more, let's call them linear and less fantastical?
Not one in particular. I've read the Brothers Grimm's. I've read a lot of the Aesop fables. Grew up under Disney movies, of course.
Right.
From that. Yeah. So it's just something that's always been there. When I got started on fairy tales I was in Russia for a summer on a language immersion. I picked up a book of Russian fairy tales and translations. I also had a copy of Tolkien's Silmarillion with me for light summer reading. And between the two, I just thought, I could write a fairy tale, sure.
Yeah.
So I started doing that, thinking, okay, I could do something, nice one-sitting story. 90 pages and 1 year later, I had the first draft of the first story of this book.
Yes. And I love Alekdar, the thief, which is that first story. So, Tales from the Forest's Edge. What does the forest mean to you as metaphor?
It's, well, there's two main meanings that are very synonymous throughout all of fairy tales. One is the source of danger. Mm-hmm. The forest is dark. There are wild animals out there. It's not safe. You'll find it in most any of the main fairy tales that we know well. Snow White. What happens when she's out alone in the forest? The trees are practically attacking her in, like, the Disney film. Red Riding Hood, the big bad wolf, lives in the forest. Yes. So there is a definite dangerous element. Mm-hmm. But there's also mystery and wonder to it. Because of that, you don't know what's in there. Sometimes you discover things, things you didn't realize. That's where the fairy aspect comes in, because you do come across things you never even knew were in there, and they may be dangerous and they may not be.
Or you see certain things that you thought had one aspect to them in the forest, an animal or flora or an obstacle to address in nature, like getting across a raging stream or something, a raging stream, and instead it becomes your friend or helps you somehow.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things that are just have it appears to be one, but then it turns out that you're wrong about that.
Do you like the forest? Do you like nature? Do you hike and go into the forest?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So, around here, there's a lot to choose from in that
Yeah,
regard.
yeah. Got to get a little farther out around from the town before you
Oh,
get into some woods, but you can get a few nice nature trails in the without having to go too far.
Without having to go too far. So, okay, so there's Alec-Dar the Thief, there's the Tanner's Daughter, and Princess Mouse in this wonderful book. Again, I'll hold it up so our viewers can see it. And so, one by one, if you just spend a little time and talk about how this particular tale seemed to be right, the right one to write for this book, and then maybe read just a bit from each one of those. I would really appreciate it.
Let's see what we can do. Well, from Alec-Dar the Thief, that was the first one. That was basically supposed to be a general style fairy tale. I just said, well, what do I need to write this? I need a plot. What's my plot? Let's do something very typical. A hero goes on a quest to win the hand of the princess. Easy. Basic stuff. So then I just had to figure out, okay, well, what's my hero? What else do I want? I got to have some elves. I got to have some fairies. Talking animals, yes, that's a staple. So I just start figuring things out, start filling in the blanks. It's like, well, how do I get talking animals? How does he talk? And I realized, like, he's a linguist. Nobody else talks to animals.
I love
He knows their languages.
And so you're writing in this ancient form, I'll give you that, right? But you're doing something very fresh, because Alec-Dar, this druid, he's a linguist with animals' languages.
Exactly, like a
He's
Dr.
an
Doolittle.
expert.
Well, he was trained. He was taught every single one. And if you've ever had to study a foreign language, how hard it is, well, imagine every single animal.
This
Takes
is
a long
Alec-Dar.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fabulous.
so that just and that just turned a little bit on the head the classic hero archetype, which is usually knight and such. And then it's like, he's just this little guy. He's just smart.
There he is.
Yeah.
Boogieing around the forest. Well, would you mind selecting something out of that story and just giving myself and our viewers a taste of your writing?
Let's see here. Why don't we go with the introduction of his boon companion that becomes along the way. So it's become a start where he's been outcast from human societies, stayed away from them for a long time, and eventually he runs into somebody who's not so unpleasant to him. So, after many months of travel in the forest, he heard a voice call out in a manner almost foreign to him. Alec-Dar, old friend, come this way and help me out for a moment, would you? Said the voice. Who said that? Asked Alec-Dar, who could not see anyone around. I am over here, the voice called again. Alec-Dar approached carefully, being now unaccustomed to hearing friendly voices. He found, near a shrub, caught in a furrier snare, a ferret. Ah, good to see you, my dear boy, said the ferret, his eyes beaming happily from his black furred mask. Do be so kind as to help me untangle myself from this confounded thing. It is made of wire and much too difficult for me to chew through, and I have no desire to be a fancy caller. Alec-Dar knelt down and began to undo the snare. Have we met before? No, not personally at any rate, the ferret admitted. Then how do you know who I am? Oh, there are many things that give you away. For example, the druid order you spring from is very small in number, my good fellow. All of the fauna know your names. As to how I recognize you, however, well, please do not think me rude or anything, but I noticed the tattoo as you passed by. I am not a thief, Alec-Dar said as he finished undoing the snare. Well, of course not, agreed the ferret. If there is any thief here, then 'tis I, for I am of the proud business of nest robber. That is a fitting name for a ferret and his family. It does accurately depicts your business.
So they are partners in crime,
Yes.
and yet they're innocent, which is such a wonderful thing. Alec in this story is accused of something that gets him banished after having been the pet of the king.
Yes.
And being able to do all these things for him that delighted the king. And yet, because of that, is threatening to the population and becomes an outcast.
Indeed.
Yeah, yeah. So that, to me, in artivism, has quite an implication that by going for what is true and right, you're automatically seen in a negative light by, let's call it, the structure, the cultural structure.
Mm-hmm.
So my hat's off to you for some artivism in your writing. Maybe we'll shift to The Tanner's Daughter briefly and maybe talk about that story a little bit, and then if you'd like, maybe read something short from it.
Okay. Well, The Tanner's Daughter came out of a much more deliberate construction. Like the first one, I came up with the plot, basic idea. The Tanner's Daughter, being more deliberate, was I looked at established stories. Mm-hmm. And there's an old saying that there are no new stories, there are only old stories retold. And so what I did was I looked at some of these and I broke it down into its absolute most core structure I could think of. Mm-hmm. And so the plot goes: an heir to a throne is sent away, raised by a foster family, and returns to claim their birthright.
Yes.
Now, can you tell me a couple stories that
There's
sounds like?
a few in there, like Moses in the Christian Bible. Yes.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, of course.
Yes.
Oedipus.
Oedipus, yes.
Just like that. So all of those stories, when you really break them down, have that exact structure. When you think about it, they're all very different when you read it, and you don't really realize that they all have that same core theme. That's what Tanner's Daughter did. I broke it down and I filled in the blanks.
Yes, to that theme. Wonderful. Would you like to read a short piece of it?
A piece from that one. What's a good one to have? I'm still in there. Okay, this is from the earliest part of the story. Basically, it's the town fair where everyone is showing their wares. She's, of course, the daughter of a tanner. Mm-hmm. And the big event of the fair is an archery contest. Mm-hmm. And the winner gets to join the king's hunt for one day. So, every hunter, woodsman, and ranger who could shoot a bow entered the archery contest. It ran long into the afternoon until only 2 people remained in contest for the first place: a woodcutter and Eudora. Eudora is the name of the main character, the Tanner's Daughter. On the last round, the woodcutter, already ahead by 4 points, got a perfect score with 3 bullseyes. The crowd cheered, feeling for certain that he won. Eudora then stepped up to the line for her final 3 shots. One of the judges spoke to her. "Your score is high enough that you cannot lose second place. You do not need to take your final turn." "I would like to do so anyway, if I may," she answered. The judges consented with her request. Eudora took 3 arrows in hand and turned away smartly. She counted out an extra 20 paces away from the target and turned back to face it. The crowd buzzed with excitement, for now she stood nearly out of range. Eudora tested the wind, raised her bow to a high angle, and in quick succession fired her last 3 arrows. Thump, thump, thump. Each arrow found its mark in the bullseye, so tightly grouped that their tips nearly shared the same hole. The crowd cheered even louder than before, and the judges busied themselves with figuring out how many more points should be awarded to Eudora's longer shot. When the crowd quieted, they said to the woodcutter, "That shot was certainly more than enough to take the lead. This is quite unusual. Therefore, we decided that you may take one more turn, my good man. If you can shoot from that distance and score enough points, then you can still win." The woodcutter, too astonished to speak, just took off his hat and bowed to Eudora, conceding the win to her.
Yeah, so the feminine wiles.
She's a very good shot.
She's a very good shot. And as we're winding down, let's talk about the Princess Mouse, the third story in this trilogy of stories in your book.
That one kind of came really out of on its own. I didn't use the same sort of formula for breaking down a story and refilling it. I just started putting pieces together, came up with an idea, and it's like it wrote itself. I mean, people say sometimes you have to really work to invoke the muse, and sometimes the muse invokes you. You're just a vehicle, a medium through which the story comes through, and that's what that one really felt like.
That's lovely.
It just kept going and going until
it was done.
Yeah, until it was done. Eventually, though, that one did take the most amount of re-editing.
Okay.
In the second draft, I really spent a lot more time with it. The first two, a little bit more, though the first one I did have to rewrite 3 times.
I hear you.
Yeah.
But with Princess Mouse, even though there's this rewriting to polish it in I like to say, when do I quit rewriting? When the next rewrite makes it worse than better for the then you stop.
Well, that's good. I never got quite that far. I had to just stop myself because I always want it better. I always want it better.
Yes.
At a certain point, I just say, I just can't work on it.
It's
anymore.
done. Yeah.
I just have to let it go as it is.
Yeah. Well, I would like for you to read something from the Princess Mouse as we wind down, and then I want to ask a final question.
All right, so I'll do one of my favorite parts, because this was
And by the way, John, I love your performance art with your delivery. You
Thank
read
you.
your stories with life. It's magnificent.
Okay, so, all right, so the situation is it's in a cottage. A young man has just spotted a mouse in the kitchen and stunned it with a wand using magic. And he put it inside this little glass lantern. It's not lit. It's early in the morning, and goes about busying himself with making breakfast. A moment later, he returned to making breakfast. He heard a voice behind him demand, "You! Let me out of here at once!" Phelan turned about and saw no one behind him. Then he heard the voice again. "Stop staring with your mouth open like a cretin! Let me out of here!" Phelan looked at the mouse in the lantern, now recovered from the stun spell, and standing with its front paws against the glass, looking very cross. "You can speak?" "Of course I can speak, you idiot boy. I am Princess Anwen of Ilion. Now let me out of here. I command it." Phelan blinked and felt very confused. "But Princess Anwen is dead." "Do I look dead to you?" "No, but you don't look like a princess either." "Oh, you hedge wizards are pigeon-brained. I was transformed by that wizard named Gareth because I refused to choose him as my suitor. Think I'd even consider being in the same room with the talentless boar?" Phelan closed his eyes and held a hand open near her. "I do feel a strong magic aura on you, but that could just be a bit left over from my stunning spell. How did, as you said, talentless wizard manage to transform you then? It takes a lot of skill to cast a transformation spell, and Princess Anwen was said to be very good at magic herself." The mouse let out an exasperated sigh. "I didn't expect it. He was at my father's court as a guest. Enough of your questions. Let me out of here." "You don't want me to do that," Phelan said. "Oh, no? Why on earth not?" At that moment, a very fat, gray, long-haired cat leapt onto the table. It let out a low, drawling meow and fixed its yellow eyes hungrily on the mouse. "Princess Anwen, meet Polnikot."
Let me out of here. What great visualization and description you have in your writing and life, and I appreciate you being on this show. We're running out of time. I'd like for you to tell everyone that's viewing today how they can get a copy of this book, Tales from Forest's Edge.
It's available on Amazon. Hard copies, you'd have to type in the title, Tales from the Forest's Edge. It's also available through Kindle as well. Kindle Unlimited users, I've made it available for free
Okay.
as well.
Fabulous.
So yeah.
Well, thank you, John. And we had other things we wanted to get to, like what you're working on now, but we're out of time. So I have a final question for you. I think we need to continue this conversation. Would you come back on and do another show and talk?
I'd like to, yeah.
Great. Thanks for being here. Okay. And thank you all for being part of this segment of YourTown television program, Artivism. I'm King Grossman. We'll see you next time in our next segment.